Hamer's other high-profile discovery looks more robust. He looked into the genetics underlying the urge for novelty, one of 5 key personality dimensions identified by psychologists. Do you cower in a corner when your routine gets disrupted? Or do you go out of your way to avoid a rut, subjecting yourself to an ever-changing kaleidoscope of new adventures? These, of course, are the extremes. Hamer's evidence pointed to a slight but significant effect of variation in a gene underlying a receptor for the brain signal molecule dopamine. Some attempts to replicate this result have failed, but others have extended it, finding the same gene implicated in particular types of novelty-seeking, including drug abuse. Violence, too, can be viewed through the lens of genetics. Some people are more violent than others. That's a fact. And violent behavior may be governed by a single gene interacting with environmental factors. This does not, of course, mean that we all carry a violence gene, although it's likely that most violent individuals do possess a Y chromosome. But we have identified at least one simple genetic change that can lead to violent outbursts. In 1978, Dr. Hans Brunner, a clinical geneticist at University Hospital in Nijmegen, Holland, learned of a family whose men tended to border on mental retardation and were prone to aggressive episodes. 30 years earlier, in an attempt to document this curse, a relative had compiled an extensive dossier on the family's woes. Brunner brought the survey up to date. He found 8 men in the clan who, despite coming from different nuclear families, evinced similar patterns of violence. One had raped his sister and subsequently stabbed a prison guard. Another used his car to hit his boss after being mildly reprimanded for laziness. 2 others were arsonists. That only men were affected suggested sex linkage. The inheritance pattern was consistent with a gene likely on the X chromosome and recessive, meaning that it was typically unexpressed in women, in whom the other normal copy on their second X would mask the faulty one's effect. In men with their single X, the recessive variant was automatically expressed. By comparing the DNA of affected and unaffected members of the family, Brunner and his team duly mapped the gene to the long arm of the X chromosome. In collaboration with Zandra Brakefield at Massachusetts General Hospital, he found that the 8 violent men all had a mutated and non-functional copy of a gene coding for monoamine oxidase. This protein found in the brain regulates levels of a class of neurotransmitters called monoamines, which include adrenaline and serotonin. The monoamine oxidase story does not end with the 8 violent Dutchmen. It turns out to provide an illuminating glimpse of the interaction between genes and the environment, the complex duet of nature and nurture that informs all our behavior. In 2002, Avshalom Caspi and others at London's Institute of Psychiatry examined why some boys from abusive homes grow up normal, while others end up antisocial, in the technical sense of having a history of behavioral problems, not in the sense of preferring to keep company with web pages over people, or of tending to be found picking at the canapes in a lonely corner at parties. The survey revealed a genetic predictor of development: the presence or absence of a mutation in the region adjacent to the monoamine oxidase gene, the switch regulating the amount of the enzyme produced. Maltreated boys with high levels of the enzyme were less likely to become antisocial than those with low levels. In the latter case, genes and the environment conspired to predispose the boys to lives punctuated by brushes with the law. Girls are less likely to be affected because, with the gene located on the X chromosome, they must inherit 2 copies of the low-level version rather than 1. Girls who do have 2 copies, however, are likely to have antisocial tendencies similar to those of affected boys. But again, the causal relation is nowhere near 100% in either boys or girls. Growing up abused and having low monoamine oxidase levels in no way guarantees a career in crime. Among the most surprising discoveries of a monogenic, single-gene impact on a complex form of human behavior is what the press have dubbed the grammar gene. As we discussed in the context of Human Evolution, Chapter 9, in 2001, mutations detected by Tony Monaco at Oxford in the FOXP2 gene were found to impair the ability to use and process language. Not only do those so affected have difficulty articulating, but they are stymied by simple grammatical reasoning that poses no trouble for the typical 4-year-old. Every day I wug, yesterday I blank. FOXP2, remember, encodes a transcription factor, a genetic switch that apparently plays a crucial role in brain development. Rather than exerting a simple direct behavioral impact, like that of monoamine oxidase, FOXP2 affects behavior by shaping the very organ at the center of it all. FOXP2 will prove, I believe, a model for momentous discoveries yet to be made. If I am right, many of the most important genes governing behavior will indeed turn out to be those involved in constructing that most extraordinary of organs, that still, supremely inscrutable mass of matter, the human brain. These genes influence us by how they build the exquisite piece of hardware that mediates all we do. We are as yet in the early days of our attempts to understand the genetic underpinnings of our behavior, both that which we all have in common, human nature, and that which sets us apart, one person from another. But this is a fast-moving area of research. I'm sure that what I've written will be out of date by the time this book is published. The future promises a detailed genetic dissection of personality, and it is hard to imagine that what we discover will not tip the scales of the nature-nurture debate more and more in the direction of nature. A frightening thought for some, but only if we persist in being held hostage to a static, ultimately meaningless dichotomy. To find that any trait, even one with formidable political implications, has a mainly genetic basis is not to find something set immutably in stone. It is merely to understand the nature upon which nurture is ever acting. And those things we as a society and as individuals need to do if we are better to assist the process. Let us not allow transient political considerations to set the scientific agenda. Yes, we may uncover truths that make us uneasy in the light of our present circumstances. But it is those circumstances, not nature's truth, to which policymakers ought to address themselves. As those Irish children who packed the hedge schools understood very well, knowledge, however awkwardly acquired, is still preferable to ignorance.